Perfect. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for tuning in to yet again to the UMiami Neurosurgery Resident Hour. This week we'll be talking about life outside the hospital as a neurosurgery intern, and talk about some of the things that we like to do when we have days off. And joining us will be Victor Liu, my co-intern, who's currently on call, so he's balancing the duties of an intern on call with joining us here today. As well as hopefully Sumed Shah will be joining us as well. He's also on duty today. So this will be, fairly brief and very informal talk overall as compared to some of our other ones. And really the objective is just to kind of highlight that there is a life outside of the hospital as an intern. A lot of it is what you make of it and what city you're in, what's around you, and what you like to do. But at the end of the day, you definitely need an outlet and some place or things to do to decompress. And so we're going to kind of touch on some of those things to do here in Miami and what we like to do as a group. So let's get started. So at every point in the day, there comes a time where you have to leave the hospital at some point. Some days you're looking forward to it more than others. But there are some days that it's a little bit tough to leave. You're on call, you happen to go across the street to the VA to see a consult, and on your way back out of the hospital, you happen to notice that episode of Jeopardy is on, and so you stop and wait a few minutes and answer some of the questions. So some days it can be a little bit more difficult. Other days you can't wait to get out of your work uniform, whether it's in the COVID unit or just popping by in the lobby out of your Wonder Woman uniform, saving lives every day as the intern, or you just can't wait to get out of the hospital by any means necessary, be that a window or the front door. Full disclosure, I was not trying to climb out the window. We were actually checking to see if it was raining or not, and to whether we could go get food across campus on one of our busier call nights. But as a whole, all of us generally look forward to getting out of the hospital on our days off and figuring out what there is to do. And so with that being said, here's a general outline of what we're going to talk about. Food, pretty self-explanatory. I think every resident knows that hospital food wears down on you after a while over the years, and so you can't wait to get out and try some new places. And then within Miami itself and South Florida as a whole, there's innumerable things to do. I've been fortunate enough to be in Miami for the last 8 years. And so even now, I still am finding new places to go, things to do, food places to eat at. And so for me, that's, really important as far as being in residency and being able to still have things that are new and exciting and fun to do. And then also at the same time, the academic pursuits, et cetera. Research, work-life balance, sometimes you leave the hospital, but there's still things you need to follow up on, and learning how to manage that, especially early on in these first, half of intern year, has definitely come with its challenges, but a lot of lessons learned, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well towards the end. And really at the end of the day, being outside the hospital, it's most of all whatever matters most to you, and how you want to spend your time and what you value and what's important to you. So we'll get into food. Most of this talk, very informal. I dug through my camera roll over the last several years and recently to try and find some good photos of things that I've done, things that some of the other interns have done so far. And unfortunately, most of these are pre-COVID. A lot of our activities, especially here in Miami, have been shut down or at least curtailed as a result of COVID, as with most places. So that's just a disclaimer for some of these things. If you don't see me wearing a mask, it's most likely pre-COVID. So great places to eat. I think Miami's an incredible food city. Oftentimes you coming out of the hospital, you want to treat yourself to something nice. Here was one of my birthday dinners about a year or two ago. We went to this place that served literally a slice of cake on top of a milkshake. And I do enjoy my sweets. And this is actually a place right near our new apartment that my wife and I went to recently, and I have amazing ice cream sundaes and all kinds of things. And another thing that Miami is actually really known for is brunch. You can get fried chicken and waffles, ceviche, some fancy scrambled eggs, all kinds of stuff throughout Miami, bottomless mimosas, a lot of places. And so it can be a great place on the weekend to go and unwind. And there's no shortage of places to go. And so I think for me, that's something that I've always enjoyed doing, checking out new places in the city. There's all kinds of food, from Japanese to Thai to Italian to obviously Cuban and Latin American cuisines. Some of the best in the country, I would say, for those types of foods being in Miami. And so you really just kind of have to know where to look, and chances are you're going to find something that's really, really good. But recently, sometimes you're reminded of the hospital even when you're outside of it. And my wife and I were at brunch a couple of weeks ago and happened to look over in the corner, and there was this PPE waste bin, and it kind of reminded me of like the COVID unit. And so you kind of have to find, see the humor in things, and know that sometimes the hospital is lurking around the corner even when you least expect it. Next, and something else that's really important to me, other than food, and probably the next biggest thing I spend my time on outside of the hospital is the music scene down here in Miami. Unfortunately, it's taken a huge hit as a result of COVID, but there's no shortage of music festivals. This is one of the local music festivals that's put on every year that I went to a few years ago, called 3 Points. Has a lot of local artists, all kinds of different genres of music. I saw Kanye West at the American Airlines Arena a few years ago, one of his tours. And that's where the Heat play, for those of you that aren't familiar, but it's also host to, huge concerts, bringing in, the biggest names and people. So here in Miami, there's definitely no shortage of big music acts. Or you can also go see the symphony, which I did one time, and that was definitely a unique experience. Hadn't done anything like that before. And then there's always the nightclub scene in Miami, which is very well known. This is Taken at Live, one of the world famous nightclubs down here. And actually in the same hotel that the spine section was hosted at last year. So, generally is a very popular spot. All the neurosurgeons, generally like to party, at least have fun. They, choose to pick their hotel and host area for the conference at the, one of the nicest hotels on the beach and with one of the biggest clubs in the country. And then lastly, this is a picture of me DJing. Now given that, everything is shut down, you have to find time for your hobbies elsewhere. And this is something that, I like to do just to blow off steam, at the end of a long day or over a weekend if I have some time, and it's enabled me to at least kind of stay in touch with the, music and creativity side outside of the hospital. So that's been one of the biggest, changes in transitioning to COVID and learning how to manage that an intern year is still being able to do the things that you really enjoy outside of the hospital. All right, another great spot that I like to go, one of the neighborhoods that's now within walking distance of my apartment, is called Wynwood, and it's the big art district. There's tons of street art everywhere. Great place to go, find some me time if you're out and about. There's a ton of bars, restaurants, all kinds of cool things to do at night, and even during the day, coffee shops, shopping, basically anything you could think of in a very, in a couple block radius. And so it's a really cool place to walk around. Also on the weekends, it's a lot of fun. There's a ton of little local breweries that serve all kinds of great beer if that's something that you're into as well. I've definitely spent, weekends here and there with friends at some of these breweries, blowing off steam and just, having a good time and getting to spend time with friends. And I anticipate that as things open back up again, that a lot of our, residency cohorts will get to meet up again and get to hang out and socialize like we used to in the past. And feel free anytime, Victor, if you have any comments or anything to jump in.
Oh yeah, hi, I'm back. Sorry. Wynwood's great. I love Wynwood. It's one of the most colorful areas in the world I've ever been to, and although it's hard, as Damien knows, to actually get out there. I've had some Sundays where you can go out there and write your notes. It's beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's another important point too, is that sometimes you're especially our weekend days are lighter days, even if you're in the hospital, not completely off. And if you're, out late morning, early afternoon, and you just have some progress notes to write, why not spend it, outside of beautiful weather, sitting at a coffee shop and just kind of, typing up some progress notes, like Victor said. I think that's, one of the things that Miami affords you as a resident, is that the weather's pretty much always nice, and, all year round. There's, no shortage of opportunities to just get outside and, get some fresh air outside of being in the hospital. And so similarly, along the art scene, there's naturally a big art scene in Miami, a lot of cross, culture coming together. This is the Perez Art Museum. It has a restaurant in there. It's, very beautiful venue, all kinds of really cool exhibits. And actually, I was just at this Institute of Contemporary Art this past weekend with my wife. It was free admission. It was not a huge museum, but able to walk through, eat up a nice Sunday afternoon walking around. And so there's, no shortage of art to check out. This was a picture I took of this like digital mirrored art pop-up installation on South Beach about a year ago that we went to. And so there's always new things popping up here and there that are, either here to stay or coming and going, that, definitely worth checking out if you have the time. And then overall, Miami is truly a city of cultures. Little Havana and Cuban culture being, certainly the most prominent, but all of the Latin American countries and South American countries as well are very well represented here. And this kind of blends, this picture of the sign in Little Havana kind of blends everything together. The Cuban culture, the Cuban coffee and espresso, which is an absolute must as a neurosurgical intern in Miami. Those are our lunch breaks and coffee breaks. They just kind of decompress throughout the day and refuel, as Victor can attest to, I'm sure. And then we have also music, dancing, dominoes, all things that are, really prominent, especially in Little Havana, and walking around during the day and at night. It's no shortage of activity going on. It's really a fun place to be. And you've got dichotomy like this, brightly, beautifully colored Azucar ice cream, which is, world famous ice cream shop, and then, Cuban cigars right next to it. And so it's really quintessential Miami and quintessential, Cuban culture here. All right. And so those are most of the kind of day things to do, here and there if you have, a free afternoon off. But there's plenty of things that if you have a little bit more time, you can really explore. I mean, Miami Beach has an incredible amount of opportunities, things to explore aside from just sitting at the beach all day and relaxing. From some of the residents even live here, and that gives its own unique flavor, being outside of the main downtown and city.
Yeah. Although, Damo, this is an intern life talk, and we don't get paid enough to live down there.
True. Yeah. maybe one day.
This is not a cheap resident talk.
I'm sorry?
This is not about life as a cheap resident. Gets to moonlight.
True. Yeah. That's definitely a bonus later on, but you can still enjoy the beaches. That's fortunately free. A lot of the activities down there, even just the nightlife, the picture on the bottom right, just showing how, everything gets lit up at night. Really just a cool place to walk around. It's a little bit more touristy, so the locals don't go there as much, but if you want to people watch and that's something that really entertains you, it's a great place to go. And the Florida Everglades is actually something I did recently. My parents came down to visit on my vacation week, end of September, and we had never been on a Everglades boat tour before. And so the picture on the bottom right is what's partly imaged the boat, and in the center is a very large, 9-foot alligator that is 100% real, that swam directly at us and came up pretty close to the boat. Definitely was a pretty nerve-wracking experience, but overall pretty incredible and breathtaking. I mean, the picture in the top right, obviously not something I took, but really demonstrates the scale of the Everglades, and it really just does look like that. It's just wide open, marshy areas that you can just fly through on the airboats, and it was actually a really, really cool tour, driving around the Everglades. Something I highly recommend. Victor, I would definitely recommend doing that one day. Checking out the Everglades.
Again, this is an intern talk, so just find me the time and I'll go.
And then Florida Keys is another thing that, if you have a little bit more time on one of our free weekends, we get every other weekend off. Typically, you can go down to anywhere in the Florida Keys. Key West is obviously the most notable. Beautiful sunsets there. This picture on the right was from a recent trip to Key West, and we stumbled across a bar in the evening that had a Stevie Nicks impersonator that happened to be a realtor for the area, and she had a dog here that was basically collecting tips for everybody. So that's kind of the flavor of Key West. Very eclectic, unusual, but always a ton of fun. And then here, if you're more into the outdoors and scuba diving in particular, there's absolutely no shortage of places to scuba dive all along the Keys, shipwrecks, coral reefs, all kinds of things. Basically, scuba divers' paradise down here as well, and a lot of our residents are involved in that as well. And then, of course, the happiest place on earth, which is not necessarily synonymous with neurosurgical intern life, but if you also have another weekend to go, definitely worth trying to get to Disney World, buy a weekend pass, go see a couple parks and have some fun there. And so this is, I want to switch gears a little bit and talking about less of the fun things to do around Miami and more the kind of lessons learned and, sometimes having to work from home, which early on was definitely a challenge. I started out my intern year, my first 4 months of the rotation was alternating week on, week off of home call. And I was terrified, that I was going to sleep through, emergent page overnight. Quickly, I realized that the pager goes off, you're going to wake up. Definitely became a very annoying sound overnight, but that was something I got used to quickly. But what I didn't quite get used to was being able to kind of separate yourself from holding the pager, not necessarily feeling like you're literally attached to the hip to the pager like you are during the day when you're holding it in the hospital. And so one weekend I was sitting at home on a Saturday watching TV or something and had the pager was on call and got that page that came across. And that's not any number that we're able to call. All of our calls are 4-digit numbers or full phone numbers. So that was a bit unnerving. And that was kind of the feeling of generally holding the pager, especially starting off as an intern on home call. Oh my God, what if a patient starts decompensating? What if an emergent page comes into the ER that you have to go in and see? And so working through those anxieties definitely was a bit of a challenge at first. But as with anything, the more you get used to it, the more you get more comfortable with patient care and just kind of how to manage, the nurses on the floor, the ED, staff who are, calling you for consults can really go a long way. And it was something that definitely took some time, but, ultimately, the senior residents probably have a better, idea. They're a little bit better able to kind of separate themselves while being at home and being on call. I think they just have more experience with it, but it was definitely one of the bigger challenges early on is adjusting to that. And then on the flip side, now that I'm on a little bit of a lighter rotation, trying to balance adding in the extracurriculars, adding in the research, adding in this, talk, and putting that, together today. Find time to sit outside, on my balcony, enjoy the view, but also find ways to get things done. And that makes things a lot more enjoyable and, better able to carve out some time to do some of these things when you feel like, oh, all I want to do is just go home and sleep or eat or both. Victor, you have anything to add regarding?
I mean, I love the balcony life. I love getting on that balcony. It's just that every time I'm on it, it's not during the day where there's sunlight. It's when it's either dark or not. But I agree, like bring the laptop out, and it's kind of one of the highlights of, of intern life is actually seeing a great view if you can live high enough.
Yeah, so I think, that's going forward is going to be, one of the bigger challenges and just something that, as interns you get used to and we'll get better and better at, managing our time outside of the hospital and, being more productive in research and the like. But it really kind of in getting to the, overall closing portion of the talk, really, and what I touched on briefly at the beginning was that it's really what matters most to you, individually. So there's always going to be that, pot of gold at the end of the rainbow here. I took this picture, one day I was, again, off of my balcony, really just to kind of, show and remind you that, there's always going to be some hope, even on the worst days, you get to come home and, are able to decompress. There's always going to be a new day. The clock only keeps going forward. They can't rewind it. You can't take days back. So you just have to take it one day at a time and keep going forward. Victor's laughing because he knows really taking it one day at a time is
Oh, let's be honest. Sometimes being an intern is tough, and so sometimes that's the only way you can do it.
And so, sometimes.
One more thing. There's a resident here called James. He's a really cool guy. When I interviewed here, he said like one of the highlights, like even though you don't sleep like enough as much as you want to, sometimes even just the drive, like you can see your view outside your window, but like even just the drive here is like amazing. You realize like you're in a beautiful place, and even just taking little moments like that, like at least during internship to me is also very valuable. You don't have to be in Miami to do that by all means. If you like mountains and you work in a mountainous area, then you can do something like that. But if you like snow, you could work up north, for example, I guess. But like you're trying to enjoy the little things as well, I think is so important, because there have been times even this week where I've thought, this is too much. So just remembering what matters most, I think, is super important. Completely agree.
Mm-hmm. And so, I think that keeping that in mind will get you through those tough days, because inevitably you're going to have a lot more of them than you're probably prepared for. I certainly wasn't. I'm only 5 months in, but it's really kind of enjoying the little things, and coming home at the end of the day. And sometimes you find that your cat is in places that he should be, and you catch him in the act, and so that can kind of brighten your day. After a long day. After getting done yelling at him and getting him off wherever he shouldn't be. And another thing that's really helped me, I couldn't show pictures of my cat without showing a picture of my wife, but I think that having a support system at home has also been something that's been, incredibly helpful, in getting through those tough days, being able to come home to somebody and vent about, whatever happened that day, or just talk about anything but the hospital, for an hour or two, has been critical in managing the stresses of internship, and then just being able to do things outside of the hospital with her has been a huge bonus. All right, and so this is the last slide here, and it's really just a reminder overall that kind of a picture of the three of us here. I'm coming out of the OR, just got to scrub a really cool case. Victor's happy that he's, all of the three of us are here. We're going to maybe get some lunch. Sumed, not so happy because the pager's been going off constantly and he's stuck in clinic. So even on the worst days like that, at the end of the week when, maybe everything's not really going your way and you got to dictate that last consult note, there's always that light at the end of the tunnel, that we've all got each other's backs. We're all going to, at one point, get out of the hospital, get to hang out with each other, which we've all done, a handful of times now, just the three of us. And it's, really been a blessing to, get to know these guys inside and outside the hospital, and be able to bounce things off of each other. I think it's, been another critical aspect to life outside the hospital as a neurosurgery intern.
Yeah, for sure. It's worth mentioning, like, this internship is hard. Like, so much is new. Like, definitely for me, not having sublight here, but having people to talk to, at least for me, in internship has been amazing. It's really gets you through things, and it doesn't necessarily have to be your co-interns. If you're at a program that only has one a year, but just having people around, it's really supportive. And I think internship is challenging no matter where you go, what you do, like it always is. But having people around you is super key. And I think here at Miami we do a great job, and it's super important. As you can see, we were all happy there because that photo was taken before we started.
We got maybe a little more rough around the edges in the subsequent months, but at the same time, we still had a few dinners together. We're hoping to get to dinner or get together this at some point this week, if we all have some time, and just kind of enjoy the holiday at least for a little bit, and kind of take our minds off of everything else. So
Adrian stops ringing. Like, end of the day, like, it really is an amazing experience. And I don't know if you guys can log into or talk with us. I can't, I have no idea on this Zoom thing, but if you can't, by all means, ask us questions on, especially if you're interested in the program as well, like the little ins and outs. Unlike other people, Damien and I, we ain't gonna lie. This is not a forum for lying. This is open conversation. Everything's, nothing's off the table. So if you guys have any questions about it, or just, how we interact or how the levels interact, by all means, feel free to ask. Probably in this chat bar.
Yeah, you can use the Q&A. Use the Q&A for questions. There's two.
So I see two questions here by Greg. So first one is, what's your favorite restaurant to take your family to when they visit? I think there's no shortage of restaurants. My parents have been coming to visit me for a number of years now. So probably the favorite one to go to is called Prime in general. They have Prime Italian and Prime Fish, but it's on South Beach. They have really nice steakhouse. They have fried Oreos for dessert, which are outstanding. I'm a big dessert guy, so any place that has excellent desserts gets extra bonus points from me. And then the other question by the same person, it seems, is, I love art, as you mentioned. What would you suggest is the place to visit when I visit? I would suggest Wynwood. I think there's the most amount to do, the most free art to see, because all you have to do is take a look around on the street and you'll find something that's interesting at the very least.
Will Cook, that name sounds familiar. Shout out to you. When do you do your research? That's a great question. How late night balcony sessions, and how many hours do you sleep? So the hard ones, Damon. I guess I'll take my shot at this, and then Damon, you can just add yours. But when do I do research? At this moment, I'm on cranial rotation, so I don't really have much time to do it. But I'd love to, and in older years, I definitely plan on doing more. I did a bit before, but ultimately, I think for me, and I think Damien would agree, our goals as interns right now is to be good clinically. We want to be a good clinician first and then a researcher. At least that's how I see it. And so, I'm just still working on my skills, and trust me, there's a lot of work to go. How many hours do I sleep? Well, that varies. Sometimes I sleep more than others, which doesn't help you at all. No, yesterday I slept 3, put it that way.
Yeah, it's really variable. I'm on our neurology rotation now, so I'm off service. So I have a bit more time. I've been working on some, research over the last several weeks. But prior to that, when I was on service, I really didn't do much research, not only because I was just starting out intern year and trying to just get my bearings and leave the hospital at a reasonable time every day, but also just when you get home, you're just tired. And fortunately, here the expectation, especially as a junior resident, is that you don't have to be, cranking out papers, multiple papers every rotation as an intern too. The faculty, the seniors, everybody understands that you're an intern. Your job, like Victor said, is to, get your clinical duties and manage the patients, to the best of your ability. And then all the extracurricular stuff is extracurricular. How many hours a week do you guys have off on average? Is it the 80-hour work week? And how do you guys become really time efficient during work? Yeah, we have every other weekend off, which is great. So, that averages out to the 80-hour work week that, is the national standard. I think the most important thing is that you have to be time efficient. I think most people, especially those applying to neurosurgery, have figured that out in some way, form or another, just to manage everything that goes into applying for neurosurgery and being competitive. But that's going to get tested regardless of how good your time management skills are. And so you really just have to learn the workflow, and it's different at each hospital. It's different on each service. It's different with each, chief that's covering, so it's really just something you have to be really adaptable to. And that was another big challenge, is learning how to really be fluid every day. Every day kind of brings new challenges, and, you have to, pivot quickly sometimes to manage all of that. Another question I see, are there any extracurriculars you wished you had done before you began intern year? Not necessarily. I think, COVID hit as I was about to match, and so that basically put a damper on all of my, pre-intern year plans, unfortunately. So, I guess there was some things there that I wished I was able to do, but outside of that, I think overall in terms of extracurriculars related to, academic production, not necessarily. I think, research, making sure you have good step scores, good letters of recommendation, this year with the sub-Is not being sub-Is, created its own challenges. But, in a perfect world, I think that generally you just have to do, kind of the main things that everybody talks about for being a competitive applicant. Let's see. Another question. How is your wife adjusting to your life as an intern? That's a good question. I think early on it was definitely very tough for both of us, especially the home call. So taking the pager home at night, setting it on the nightstand, and at night and putting it on loud, woke both of us up more often than we would like. So that was definitely an adjustment for her, and I give her a lot of credit for quickly adjusting to that. Me getting up early in the morning to go to the hospital every day, coming home late at night, and so we found our own ways to carve out time for each other. When I come home at the end of the day, or sometimes I'm home before she gets home from work, and we'll cook dinner for each other. Little things like that, I think, go a really long way over the course of residency, and setting the tone now as an intern and building those habits will set us up for success as we go forward. And as you matriculate through residency too, beyond junior residency, the time constraints should get better. Oh, Dr. Shaw, welcome.
Thank you, guys. Hello. I'm signed under Rick right now, Dr. Komatar, but I guess my link wasn't working. But
oh, you cut out. You're muted.
I'm one of the interns here as well with Damien and Victor. I apologize for my tardiness, but I echo everything they say.
Anything else? Anything you want to add? Any general pearls, lessons learned, tips, tricks? Anything from intern year so far?
No, I think intern year is definitely a learning curve. I think the most important thing, and for me, the thing that's gotten me through is just having as positive as an attitude as possible. Like, you're gonna have a lot of tough nights, a lot of consults that you don't think need to go to you, or just work that other people are putting on you, anything of that effect. But at the fundamental end of the day, it's like an honor to do this kind of stuff, and so to take that mentality forward, it has really helped me get through some of the tougher times. And I definitely think that if you're happy with your job and with work, and then particularly with like significant others and such, I know my significant other, she's, as long as I'm like happy and doing what I love, I think she understands that, and we make time for each other when time is available. So that's a life outside of neurosurgery is supposed to be as sweet as life inside neurosurgery. So
well said. Let's see, we have some more questions here. Thanks for all the questions too, and the feedback. So kind of similar lines to the previous question, how do you get to manage your family life in your program? I think a lot of the residents here, as Suma just said, are in relationships, whether they're, relatively new or, long-standing, have been married, have kids. And so the program itself is very supportive of, having a family life. And I think all the residents really value, having time for their family outside of the hospital. And at the same time, when the residents get together, and hopefully we'll be able to do that soon as a cohesive unit, the spouses come along, and significant others, and everybody, and they all get along with each other. I think that was something that I thought was really important, knowing that I was going to get married prior to starting intern year, and was hoping to get kind of into the fold as well with the other residents. Step one is pass fail. What is the new standard for being a competitive applicant? It's tough to say. I mean, I think that step one, and Sumedh, you can kind of touch on this as well. I think step one was kind of the entry level sort of benchmark to say, okay, this is kind of what tier applicant you are, give or take a little bit. But I think overall, what really spoke more to an applicant's status are the letters of recommendation and like sub-I performance, which this year obviously was a little bit different, but in general, I think that really goes a long way. How you interact with other neurosurgeons, other residents, other programs, and how your own program views you, I think is really what speaks volumes when programs around the country are reading your application.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the step one is no longer going to be the main metric of how you're going to really determine neurosurgical applicant candidacy, just because of the fact that it's going to pass fail soon regardless. I think step two, I think even then, step two, these are all like check marks in your box. Of course, to have as good of a score as possible is good, is great. But at the end of the day, as long as you meet a certain benchmark, and that all that information is available online, like the NRMP sends all this data out every 2 years, and so how those benchmarks are increasing is actually there. But I think more important than that, like Damien said, is just going to be how you perform. Like, and then no one asks me like what my step one score was, but everyone asks me, or the expectation is to work really hard, and I think that you have to convey that attitude, availability, and affability, the 3 A's of that Dr. Komatar always talks about: to be available, to be affable, and to be able. That one I'm working on. That's it.
So do you guys follow a night float system or a 24-hour call? Any tips or tricks on being on call? So we don't have a night float system. We have kind of a mix of calls. As an intern, we don't take any 24-hour call overnight in the hospital. So what Victor is doing now is basically a buddy call. So he's with a more senior junior resident that will stay overnight. But Victor is there as the intern to basically learn how to manage patients so that when next year we do our 24-hour calls, we're all fully prepared. And so he answers pages, he's consults, he's basically responsible for the pager that covers the entire Jackson and VA hospital system. So it's definitely a lot, can be overwhelming at sometimes, but at the same point, this is all what we signed up for. We want it to be an environment where think on your feet quickly, a lot of stuff, can happen all at once, and learning how to manage that and prioritize triage is, critical. So I don't know, Sumed, if you want to talk about the home call too.
Yeah. I'm coming off of Jackson Cranial, which I know Victor's on right now, and so that was as Damien was saying, was interesting. You're on, then you're off. But at home call, as Damien is also, I imagine, saying, you're always on for that week. And so I think the real interesting part has been for me knowing and learning when you need to go in and when you don't need to go in, like what you can manage remotely. And that's definitely something that takes a lot of time to get to understand. Like every little thing, like, oh, patient had a headache. You're like, oh my gosh, is this a subdural hematoma that I missed? And a lot of that is like you kind of get the gestalt of what you need, like when you need to go in, when you don't need to go in. What did Damien said this to me: if there's blood in the head, get out of bed. That was his advice to me before I started, and it rings true. Blood in the head, get out of bed.
Yeah, I forget. I can't take credit for that. I forget who told me that one. It might have been Victor's counterpart there, the illustrious Dr. Baudou, who was on CUY3 when I was at UMH and was giving me some advice.
He's illustrious and absent at the same time. It's an amazing combination.
Okay, thanks so much for the time, guys. Quick question: who you guys play ball against? I unfortunately don't. Basketball is not in my DNA. I'm more of a golfer, which there's plenty of that to do around as well. I think a lot of the senior residents play a lot. I don't know exactly who they play against. I'm sure each other. I'm sure like a lot of the ENT residents we're pretty good friends with since we work closely with them. Anesthesia as well. I know there's a lot of people. And then obviously the softball tournament as a whole, once that gets going again is, highly competitive in that every year. We definitely take it very seriously for anyone that wants to be a part of that.
You know, I want to reach out to Syed and say, that's a great question. You know what's a better question? Who do you go watch the Miami Heat with? That's the question. And so I think all the guys here love to go. So, I mean, that's we all go to watch it at least. I can't say I play, but I watch it.
Yeah.
I personally am a baller, so I do play here and there, and right, it's been fun to play basketball, but it's been definitely, as an intern, your job is primarily towards that hospital, but when you do have those weekends off, like Damien was saying, we get every other weekend off. I try to go at least shoot some hoops. There's always like some guys playing at the local park, and COVID has made it a little bit difficult. I don't really want to play with random people, but at least with the other like residents and stuff, there's always some games that come up here and there. Less so now because of COVID, but that's other residents and then randos is who I play basketball with.
Nice. Yeah, and I think the weather is amenable to doing all kinds of outdoor activities. You know, there's no shortage of people to courts, you know, around Brickell and downtown. Always stuff to do. What qualities make a strong sub-I? Well, I think Sumit already touched on it too. The 3 A's. You know, is something that Dr. Komatar teaches a lot. Something that Dr. Wang, one of our spine surgeons, says a lot and kind of takes to heart is being a Navy SEAL, in the sense that just stop at nothing to get the job done. Very letter to Garcia-esque for those of you that are kind of familiar with that mantra as well, which is very popular in neurosurgery. And it's really just about being dedicated, being committed, and getting the job done. Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Somebody asks you to, take care of something, follow up on this lab, make sure this patient gets a head CT in time. These are all things that you need to learn how to do quickly and efficiently, because chances are you've got another, whole list of equally as important, if not more important, things to get done at the same time. And so it all goes down to, time management really, and learning how to prioritize. Either of you guys have anything to add to that, or looks like one more question. Last one here. There are some that say that when you're on call every other night, you'll miss half the good cases. That's not incorrect. With the work hour regulations, do you feel you'll be prepared for real life? Oh, like Greg asking the tough questions here. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's tough to say. Is that 5 months in intern year, if the work hour regulations are going to have an impact. Obviously, we weren't in practice doing this when the work hour restrictions were not regulated. So I can't imagine what that must have been like back then to be working as much as we are now and still having that regulated compared to maybe a couple decades ago where that wasn't the case. But I think that with the breadth of what we've seen so far between the three of us, all separately have had very different experiences, but at the same time similar experiences in the sense that we've all had our incredibly crazy nights where you're like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. Like, how am I going to even get home in a reasonable time to finish all this work? So I think over time we'll build that ability and preparation for the rest of our careers, but still very early on. We've got a lot of time left. That's why it's a 7-year program.
Yeah, it's not like you're missing out. What's common is common. Like, even if you only work every other day, like, what's common is common. If you don't see it today, you'll see it tomorrow. And we've all had our fair shares of EVDs. I don't think any of us here are like trying to think that someone's on more EVD nights than others. And as we all go through our rotations, we all see our fair share of shunts, closures, openings. It all evens out. Right? I mean, maybe COVID's affecting maybe the start of things, but I mean, ultimately, like the skills you need at the end, I think we're all getting it, no matter when we're taking call. Except the weekend. Like, I feel like the weekend you just get more because you're just holding the pager all day. That's it.
Yeah, and I mean, I am not to like put a plug out on Miami or about Miami, but yeah, every other day you will still see everything. You will still see everything over here. So like, yeah, you may miss like what, the half the good cases. You won't miss half the good cases in Miami because there's a good case every night.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And then you're at UMH, you're at Jackson, you're at the VA, you cover multiple hospitals. So you have the opportunity. And the work hour restrictions for 80 hours a week, like for example, when you're on call 24/7 at UMH, for example, like that's how it's going to be like in the community. You're not going to be like, unless you're like I imagine in like a rural environment where you're on call 24/7 for like months on end. You're going to be on for a week, off for a week, because you're going to be with like other partners. If you're an attending in a big institution, you're going to have call days and not call days. So the work hour restriction was like meant to designed to protect residents and protect patients. But at the end of the day, like it all evens out towards the end, and you have experiences in residency that are going to help prepare you for what life is like as an attending neurosurgeon, whether in the private community or in an academic center.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I think at the same time too, you know, as an attending, you don't get that next day protection. If you're operating all night, like, you know, we had some of our attendings actually last night, literally operating through the evening on a, you know, really difficult, emergency case. And then you've got a, full day of cases the next day or clinic the next day. It's not like you're just going to wake up at, 6 a.m. and be like, well, I'm tired. I was in the OR all night. I'm going to cancel my clinic or cancel my cases. You kind of, building the stage now, I think, and learning how to fight through those long nights, is going to pay off in the end. And it's only going to prepare you for when you're in attending, and, that's, what you have to do regardless. Okay, well, thanks everybody for tuning in. It looks like there aren't any more questions. We won't take up any more of your time this evening, but we really appreciate all the support and all the questions, discussions. We'll keep an eye out for more, talks throughout the year. The next one will be at the end of December, and we'll see you next time. Okay, take care, everybody.